Ladies and gentlemen, our program will now begin. Please welcome the CEO of the Churchill Club, Karen Tucker.
Thank you. Good morning. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to this program called the Internet of Things Reality Check and What's Next. In the last few years, there have been plenty of predictions, IoT-related, billions of devices getting connected, trillions of dollars in value. This panel this morning will discuss new benefits they believe are possible in the near term, such as how and where IoT could advance consumer experiences, industrial operations, introduce new business models, create new revenue streams, that sort of thing. So here to weigh in, we have Wang of ZingBox, Thorsten Schaefer of Azeti, Maciej Kranz of Cisco, and Martin Giles of Wang Venture Capital, who will both lead and contribute to the conversation, and David King, FogHorn Systems. We chose our topic based on a New York Times best-selling important new book by Maciej Kranz entitled Building the Internet of Things, Implement New Business Models, Disrupt Competitors, Transform Your Industry. And we would especially like to thank Maciej for his assistance in developing this program, as well as enabling us to give all of you a complimentary copy of his new book.
All right.
And this is available for you as you leave the event.
If you promise to read it.
And we'll see if we can we'll see if we can persuade Maciej to stay around a little bit afterward to personalize your copies. We're very grateful to Fenwick & West for hosting us, so thank you. Churchill Club is an independent, nonprofit business and technology forum. We've been operating here in the Bay Area since 1985. Our mission is to encourage innovation, economic growth, and societal benefit. We try to choose topics that are ripe for opportunity, that are not over-discussed. We always respectfully request that our speakers refrain from pitching and promoting, but rather to add new insights to the discussion that perhaps they have not said publicly before. We are member-supported, and we do invite others in the audience to join us. Finally, if you're tweeting, please use the hashtag Churchill Club. And now let's give a very warm welcome to our panel.
Okay, thank you, Karen. Can you all hear me okay? Yeah, good. So Karen did a sort of brief introduction. I will just sort of run down, just so you know exactly what the companies are. I mean, they are in your programs, but just in case. So ZingBox, IoT security. Cisco, I don't know what Cisco does, but. And then we have Thorsten from Azeti, which does basically its edge analytics and edge controls. It's an IoT operating system, is that right, for edge analytics and edge controls. And then David King from FogHorn Systems, which is the leader in edge intelligent software for industrial IoT. My name is Martin Giles. I was, for a long time, a journalist with the Economist newspaper, including running the Silicon Valley Bureau, covering technology, and then I got religion and moved to venture capital, and nobody now speaks to me from the Economist, the dark side. I'm always a pleasure to come to the Churchill Club, especially when I see in the back of the program things like cabinet members, parliament, etc. There will be no church exit from here. There will be Brexit, but no church exit. We're going to stay here till 9:15 and we're going to have a great morning. Let's get straight into this. When you look at what's happening with IoT, I think my colleague Gaurav Garg has a really nice sort of parallel, which I wanted to give you at the beginning. He parallels it with the development of electricity. When you see electricity in the late 1800s come in, very quickly you could see some sort of obvious applications like, the electrical refrigerator take over from the icebox. But nobody could have foreseen what would come 20, 30, 40 years later, the television, the microwave. And I think, in industrial IoT, consumer IoT, we're sort of in that early phase of electrification. We're still drilling, we're still putting sensors in, we're still sort of getting the connectivity right. But these people are right on the edge of that innovation, and what we're going to try and do now is sort of look out 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 years and take that reality check, but ask ourselves what might be coming next. So I'd just like to kick off, and I think we're still in the early stages. Some people think IoT is completely overhyped. We're right at that peak of the hype cycle. Do you guys agree with that, or do you think it's sort of underestimated? David, do you want to?
I actually think we're in the very, very, very early stages of IoT in the industrial sector. I think you've had some very, standout consumer products like, Nest thermostats and drop cam cameras in the home that have kind of taken hold of the public imagination. And a lot of Silicon Valley attention and money has gone more into consumer-related type IoT. I think it's hyped today, but because IoT now has this kind of grand sweeping vision, literally everything in technology is now some form of IoT, right? When you talk about connecting every device, it means it's the whole stack, right?
Right.
So, to that extent, there's a lot of hype, but I think we're going to go through multiple waves of hype before this all plays out.
Anybody else want to?
Yeah, my sense is that I think we are in exactly the right spot. So yes, we've gone through a couple of years of hype. And what I see talking to customers, and I've been traveling all over the world talking to a lot of organizations, is that now I think we're starting to see this model of, yes, think big, but start small, right? Start with the first project, may not be very glamorous, maybe just focused on improving existing processes, efficiencies around connecting operations, remote operations, and so forth. But people are getting started. And because I think for me, IoT, as David said, is it's probably not much about technology. It's about sort of a digital transformation, and you're changing how you operate, how the industries work, what are the skill sets and talents. So it's a journey, and I think we are sort of in the first two stages of the journey.
Thorsten? Yeah.
I couldn't agree more to Maciej. I think the worst thing for technology is to be on the hype cycle on the top. I spoke to Gartner and said, I cancel my contract if you don't put IoT off the hype cycle. Because it's obvious. Every hype cycle delays technology by 2 years of adoption because everybody on a CeBIT fair, on a CES in Vegas puts the logo on it, IoT, IoT, IoT. So consumers get, in phase of IoT 24/7. Sometimes the same company comes with 3 different teams and 3 different platforms of IoT. Everybody talks about big picture, and that's the wrong way, as you say. You need to renovate the whole thing, cloud infrastructure. You need all sensors all over the place. You need this and this. Customers get confused and delay decisions for 2 years until clarification of the market, instead of starting small and then get big. So any hype cycle topic delays business, real business, by 2 years. That's my opinion.
May? What about?
I think IoT was at the peak of that curve about a couple of years ago. I think probably because Thorsten's thread now is definitely not there. And of course it's impossible for anything to stay there forever. But so if we're talking about, when we say hype, we're talking about media attention, talking about how much people are talking about it. I think we're definitely over there, which I agree is a really, really good thing because I think lots of real effort, lots of real practice actually started after this whole hype thing. But I think in terms of implementation, adoption, we're just so, I agree with David, we're just so at the beginning. Because when you go to the real world, you talk to your customers, and also just look around ourselves. Other than the cell phone, laptop, iPad, how many things around you what kind of percentage of objects around you are connected online? Very few percentage. And when we go to talk to enterprise customers, when we talk about IoT's different layers, connectivity, cloud, application, most of things are not there. Even connectivity, lots of things are not there yet. So I think there are still lots of opportunities and lots of things to be done.
Can I maybe add one more comment? Because I think it's important to understand that IoT is not one market, right? It's a collection of different markets. And you need to be looking at what is the industry, which geography you're looking at, and what are the use cases. And I think that the maturity actually varies quite dramatically depending on whether you're looking at discrete manufacturing versus oil and gas versus healthcare versus retail versus here or in India, for example, right? So we need to be sort of taking that approach as well.
So that's a challenge. It's a very broad church, and we can cover a lot of different areas. But I thought an interesting sort of way to get right into the nub of this is what we want to do is where's the puck going? It's our Wayne Gretzky moment, right? So I'm going to be a generous fellow. We just raised a $250 million fund. I'm going to give, without talking to my partners, $5 million to each of you. And
perfect.
You can be investors for the morning, actually maybe for 10 years. We're going to look out, right? Venture capital sort of time frame and returns. You can't invest that 5 million in your own area, right? And you can't do it in IoT security. You can't do it in everything that Cisco does, which is quite constraining. You can't. So it's got to be somewhere else. Where would you put that 5 million and why? May, where would you put your 5 million?
Well, I think the whole network infrastructure is going to continue to improve thanks to Cisco. I see where the most opportunity is for IoT moving forward. It's basically, as everybody knows, it's a marriage of IT and OT, operational technology. And we are making lots of effort from the IT side. But I actually see the biggest opportunity is we get more operational people involved, whether it is in healthcare, whether it is in manufacturing, because that's where the most business, how do we digitize their business? And we cannot do that alone by having IT people only. So I would look into a startup that really knows have the domain knowledge, knows about the specific areas problem, not just like I have a hammer here, I have this cool algorithm, I'm a technologist, I have plenty of cool algorithms, but we need to find the application, and very probably like things like machine learning, you can find lots of applications, but as a startup, you need to find that one particular area or one particular pain point.
But which one would you, sorry to push you on this, but you're my partner now, I've just given you 5 million, so where are you going to put that? Which sector would you put it in?
I actually see lots of opportunities in multiple sectors.
But you've got to choose one.
If I have to choose one, I definitely do healthcare.
Healthcare. Okay, and so basically operationalizing IoT in healthcare. Perfect, Maciej.
So I will split the money in half.
Cheating.
Cheating.
Give half back to me. No, okay. So what would you do?
I'll keep one of those. But so because you work in a security company, that's probably why you haven't mentioned security. But I would go after security. It's a number one concern, opportunity. And probably immediate opportunity for vendors. So focusing on integration with the legacy systems, but also new use case like vehicle to vehicle and so forth. And the second part, I would focus on vertical apps because, as I mentioned earlier, I think it's you really need to be hyper local with what industry you're going after, what geography, what a use case is, and I would probably look at vertical apps either in industrial or in agriculture.
So again, sort of pushing you. I mean, where in IoT security and where in apps? You're going to put your 2.5 million.
So if you look at IoT security, I would probably look at new use cases like vehicle to vehicle.
Vehicle to vehicle.
Yep.
Really interesting. Okay, and then in apps, you would go one app.
One app. I think there's a lot of players in industrial, so I will probably go after agriculture.
Got it. Okay. So May, you now have a new competitor. Be worried. Thorsten?
We're growing the market.
Yeah, you're growing the market. Absolutely.
So I would invest in FogHorn, to be honest. No, I like it. No, really, it's a great thing. No, but before you throw your coffee at me, I spelled the two words. It's called artificial intelligence, and don't like you heard this a million times. And I think don't go for the base thing. I think we have the base things now. There's some artificial intelligence frameworks available. Yeah. That's done. Go for the next phase of artificial intelligence. These artificial intelligence means use the current platforms and make applications out of this. And one specific case I like the most is called the universal sensors. Historically, this was called video cameras, thermal, motion detection, stuff like this. Historically, video cameras can not only detect now motion or something like this, they can detect 3 people in front of an ATM behaving miscellaneously and not making a transaction. Boom, they try to steal money or whatever, blow up the ATM, as we know, Maciej. Mm-hmm. So this is the other word. But the unique device I really like is microphone. Microphone combined with artificial intelligence on an edge device, and this could be a phone. So drive your car, you drive a Chevy Tahoe or whatever, I don't know if this is like car. Tesla probably doesn't make any sound, but you drive a Chevy Tahoe, and this app, you configure before, and you say, I have a Chevy Tahoe, I have this espresso machine, I have this filter pump for my pool, I have this and this and this. And this app will tell you, this is not going to work.
Got
Your
it.
filter pump is screaming outside.
But you got to land somewhere. Where are you going to
Yeah.
start? Maciej's point. Where are you going to start? Where would you put your 5 million now?
Yeah, in this company,
In the microphone, do
building this
everything.
microphone recognition algorithms from people screaming on the street. The phone will say, "Hey, call the police. This guy's screaming.
Got it.
You know, for what reason?"
Got it.
The Chevy Tahoe is, you know, making bomb, 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 bomb. Can I send this to Chevy? Yes. Okay. Chevy will come back and say, "Come to the garage now."
Got it. So, David, Thorsten's listening to you, whatever you do, which is my worry. Where would you put your 5 million?
Well, I return the compliment. I think both FogHorn and Azeti are in this wave.
Oh, that's
of-
too not. No,
No,
that's
no.
too not. No, no.
Yeah.
Enough cugging now.
Yeah, we've done.
You want me to sit in the middle?
Yeah, can you sit in the middle of it too?
We're in this wave of platforms for the edge now, where
Yeah.
all the attention over the last, say, 5, 10 years have been platforms in the cloud,
Yeah.
right? You know, concepts like digital twin, which GE pioneered and all that. Now the focus has shifted to the edge, which I think is very, very important. But I think platforms, I wouldn't say they're dead, but this is playing out already, right? And I would also say, to be honest, with Maciej's point on security, IoT security has not been solved in any way, shape, or form. But I've seen literally 100 companies in the last 3 months that are focused on it. So I'm not sure I'd put any
Finally.
money. Yeah, no, a lot of different approaches, a lot of cool things. I wouldn't put money there. So I'm going to actually combine what May and Thorsten said. I think the big opportunity is to apply intelligence, both edge and cloud, with domain-specific knowledge in operations, right? And I would actually apply it in manufacturing. So we've got great platforms in the cloud, right? You know, from the GEs to everybody's got the industrial cloud. And we've now got a great edge set of solutions. But where are the algorithms, right? Who's going to actually move it forward to actually have, you know, very specific value-added use cases? Because Maciej's exactly right. The one thing I've learned since taking over FogHorn is it's going to come one machine, you know, one asset, one process at a time. That's how you get to the trillions. It doesn't start top down.
Got it. So we had a nice spread of things there. I mean, you touched on platforms, and I just want to pick that up because I did some research about 6 months ago where I looked at 3,000 odd deals that have been funded over the past sort of 5 years in IoT, and almost a third of them were platforms in some way or other, right? It was like going to Paddington Station and you see like 50 different platforms ahead of you. It's like everybody's a platform.
And 2 trains.
And 2 trains, yes, correct. You've been to London recently, have you? So it's platform, is that where you should be aiming? And should we be thinking, if we're launching businesses in IoT tomorrow, should we all be thinking, hey, we want to be a platform? Because ultimately that's the goal. And you know, venture capitalists, we love platforms, of course, so we want everyone to think about platforms. But where would you go, and do we think platforms are overdone? And where's the game going to play out there? May, do you want to sort of start? I mean, you know a lot about healthcare and platforms there.
Sure. I think IoT is a very, very segmented thing. So I think it's natural for people to think about platform. It will be really great, you know, instead of every device has its own cloud, has its own app, and if I can have a single pane observation, visibility, that's great. But on the other side, that is something extremely hard to do. Just give an example. I once talked to a top executive of one of the one of the biggest consumer electronic manufacturers. And they rolled out, you know, as lots of companies do, big companies do, they rolled out their platform. And I was like, hey, this is great. This is look very interesting. So does it mean all the devices manufactured by your company are now on this platform? He said, no. We couldn't get any of our product to be on our platform. That's why we're promoting externally, so that, you know, external people, other companies can start the adoption, and we can go back and have our internal products.
Do as I say, not as I do.
Yeah. So it's a very, very hard thing to do, not just for startups, but even for big companies.
David?
I was going to say, I think the reason platforms have been the dominant focus, partly it's kind of a VC-driven mentality for startups.
Oh, it's your fault.
Yeah, guilty.
You've got technology, you don't want to limit its potential. You want the billion-dollar play, not the $100 million play.
Correct.
And so there's a tendency for the private company to start out that way. But I've noticed that in the last 18 months, there's been a lot of shifting of gears to say, well, let's get specific so we can monetize this platform. It's too hard to chase all the different, you know, moving pucks here. So I think on the large company side, the problem is if you don't start big with platform, it doesn't move the needle, right? You know, and so that's why I think everybody's been talking platform. I do think that it's going to start to get more vertical. But I'm not saying that companies should just start vertical, right? I mean, if you've got a great idea, until you know where the real payoff is, it's a mistake often just to say this is going to work in oil and gas.
Got it.
business.
So what we see is a huge trend at the moment is in the former years it was so that every startup wanted to develop an IoT platform. If you would give me 5 million now, I would say give me 50 for an A round, I make a platform, but not with 5 anymore. The game is over. For startups, IoT platform, game over. The big telcos currently considering this, and that's a great move. So if the startups concentrate on domain expertise with certain use cases, start small, make it big, and the big telcos and companies make these platforms, and you will see this in the future, you will not have a solution for a Honeywell air conditioner. You will have a plug-in, like an app on the server side, so in the cloud, and you will have a plug-in at the edge intelligence for that air condition in a common platform run by Verizon, for example. And I think this is the play. So the startups can contribute the Lego bricks for the Verizon platform, just as an idea. And then the companies like Honeywell and GE can deploy apps like on an Apple iPhone or an Android phone on the cloud side and on the client side. In 1 minute, you can monitor an air condition with this concept. But a startup cannot run this anymore. You would need $500 million for that.
Fully agree with what is said. Just you know, to be honest, I don't take any meetings with a company that tells me that they are an IoT platform, because my focus would be what is one use case that you're solving in an industry. And I think that the misconception is that we sort of think in a technology world about horizontal opportunities, where these IoT markets are huge. If you focus on remote asset management in oil and gas industry, it could be a $100 million business for you, right? So it's sort of a misconception that I have to go horizontal to make it big. But there's another point I want to make, which is I think there will be a lot of rationalization and consolidation, even for not only across startup community, but also for large players. Because a lot of the large players also are developing platforms, from SPs to technology companies. And when you think about from a customer perspective, if I operate a plane, do I really want to have 5 or 6 different platforms? One platform for an engine, one for a cockpit, one for a brake system, right? So I think that we will start looking at the rationalization also as standards are starting to catch up. So you don't have to now connect separate sensors with different interfaces. Now we'll start standardizing those.
Right. And isn't that the real value of when IoT really becomes valuable to us as a society and an economy? It was when the interconnectivity allows us to do things like drive home, have the heat on, have the light on, you know, have my kids already making and cleaning up, which would be a miracle. But if IoT can do that, that would be wonderful. But it's that interconnected experience. I mean, if I'm going to the airport, like everything, I get up on my phone, everything is there. The time of the flight, traffic conditions, state of my car, the whole thing. How far away are we from that? And if you're going to do a startup tomorrow, even though everything we've said about platforms, isn't that really where there's an opportunity, making that work?
Maybe I can add to it before other folks chime in, but I sort of believe that we're moving into the world of anti-platforms, right? Where it is about the ecosystem. So, for example, David's company and Thorsten's company and May's company building the ecosystem, and this becomes the virtual platform versus individual company actually having the platform.
Got it.
So it's interconnection, as you said, would be the way to go.
May, any thoughts about it?
I think it's like networking early days, you know, when we first connected all the devices, but Cisco boxes were not talking to Juniper boxes, and eventually till we had a standard, then everybody started to talk to everybody. I think that's kind of the ultimate goal, that's true, but I think we're still far away from that.
Got it.
What would help a lot if you ask for interconnectivity going to the consumer side is if we come really up as this personal token. We speak about this for so many years, 10 years, and it's security and all this stuff. Still, you go on a day trip, and everybody of you know this. You start in the morning, you go to the airport, you check in. You always go, same data, passport here, whatever. Then you're in the plane, you ask for the wireless access in the plane, you type in your credentials, again, all this stuff. You go to, and rental car companies is the worst. Nobody should admit me. You know, this system is 70s. They're still typing in this 3270 screen things and stuff like this. And I said, I did this 4 times already. I checked in online. Why are you typing another 5 minutes into this system?
Right.
You know? So we urgently, please let us all work on urgently personally talking. You know, I want to travel the whole day, not single type anymore.
Got it.
Just confirm on the phone. Credit card check, no receipt. You know,
Right.
this, check in, check in, check in.
I think
This would help us so much.
wherever there are pain points and IoT can take those pain points away, that's great. We're still sort of not there yet, and maybe there's connectivity, there's standards, there's all kinds of things that have to happen. But thinking about where those pain points are and how in a networked fashion you can remove them is very powerful. We want, in the sort of brief that Churchill gave us, it's to think about sort of revenue streams and business models, as well as sort of where is the opportunity. Let's just explore that a little bit. I mean, I've seen, for example, in drones, there's been this sort of massive pivot away from making the drones to adding services to drones. So now I'm not like I'm 3D robotics. I sucked up $100 million plus venture capital to try and take on the Chinese. Can't win. But now what I'm going to do is provide drones with services for surveying and prospecting. So it's a subscription-based model. You pay me by the month. I provide you the drone and the service. That sort of hardware service model is an interesting one. How many other kinds of models are out there? And are there sort of new innovative revenue models that we should be thinking of, David?
Yeah, so SaaS subscription models, they're the norm today. But like platforms are proliferated. Everybody's a SaaS company, right? There's a few hardware companies left, but almost everybody's doing software and SaaS. Actually, I think where it's going is, we're fortunate to have GE as a lead investor. They are phenomenally successful at new kind of business models. And the business model is they call gain share, right? Which is the concept of, the old profit share model. But sometimes it's not profit share, it's loss minimization or efficiency improvement. So they say, let's benchmark this wind turbine and say, over the last 30 days, you've produced this much power output. Now, with our end-to-end solution, which takes all the elements of the stack to deliver, I'm going to give you at least 5 to 10% improvement. And if I get more than that, I get half the profits.
Got it.
That kind of model, I think, is where this is all going to go.
So gain share, any other kinds of models?
Yeah, what I've seen is a big move towards the service-oriented business model, which is sort of extension of what David was talking about, right? Now that you have everything connected, you can actually just buy capacity of the plant, and you're better off doing that from the bottom line perspective than just building the plant and operating the plant.
Got it. And May?
To answer your question, where I see the money is, I think there are two areas in IoT. One is data, and because of IoT, all of a sudden we can get so much data real time that almost impossible before. And now the problem is most people, whether in manufacturing, healthcare, whatever, have no idea how to collect this data, how to analyze the data, how to manage the data, how to secure the data. So I think there's a huge opportunity there because that's something didn't exist before. And the second is the usability, because before at Cisco, we generate technology, we generate products to IT people. But nowadays, most of our technology consumers are not IT people. They're doctors, nurses, they're operational people. How do you use your product? How do you make the product easy to use, easy to manage for non-technical people?
I think those two great. I mean, the data one is really powerful because one of the things IoT is going to do when sensors are everywhere, we're going to have big data is going to look tiny. And I think when we look ahead, we try to look for what we call data-first companies. And they're companies that sort of not only take the sort of direct exhaust stream from their own output, but they combine it with other data sources, either from other algorithms that they have or from third parties, and they can come up with value-added insights. And security is a great area. I'm sure sort of networking systems and operations is another one. So we'll see huge advances in those areas. Thorsten, you want to say?
Yeah, and I always like this example. Probably BMW has globally 150,000 places where they get compressed air. Somewhere in the fabrics for different kind of tools. And there's this vendor from Germany, typically Black Forest kind of market leader. Nobody heard the name ever, despite the industry. And they're shipping like 10,000s of compressor. And one day BMW says, I'm not going to buy compressors anymore. I buy compressed air at 150,000 dispensation points. And this is the description. So the RFP is a one-pager. Says these are the locations around the world, 72 degrees Fahrenheit, whatever, humidity like this, pressure like this. Deliver. And I don't care how this works.
Right.
In that moment, if this company doesn't have an IoT strategy and a monitoring by usage, they're gone. They're out of business.
Yep.
Even they have been the long year supplier because there will be a competitor saying, I can charge by air, not by compressors.
Got it.
Because I have IoT.
Maybe add to it also, going on a sort of it's all about the data topic. David, your company, right? We are seeing a huge shift in the architecture from sort of take all the data to the cloud and do batch processing and analyze it into much more of a real-time or near real-time data in motion, right? Which is, I think, what all of you do, right? And that sort of requires a shift to a different architectures. We actually call it fog computing. It was actually yesterday announced, Open Fog Consortium announced reference architecture. But this is actually really important, right? Sort of evolution of the cloud to now more of a distributed cloud architectures.
Got it. And I mean, we haven't sort of talked about more of the consumer side, really, but let's just focus one area I think we're all concerned about is vehicles. Okay, so we're going towards a world of driverless vehicles.
Flying vehicles?
Flying vehicles, yeah, I'm surprised Elon hasn't actually got there yet, but I'm sure he will. It's like, where in the transportation vehicle space do you see opportunities in the next 2, 3, 5 years? I mean, if you're doing a start, for a long while, it was really hard to do anything in that area because there were sort of 4 or 5 very large companies that dominated. I'm excluding the Germans. I'm just talking about the American market. But now, talk the German market too, or the global market. Now it's really interesting. You see companies like Cruise, companies like Otto come along. So you can build really significant, potentially, companies in those areas. Where else in transportation might there be opportunities going forward? Start, David?
Sure. So one of the sectors that we're focused on, in addition to kind of manufacturing energy, is transportation. And I think it's going to take different time for different markets, but I think you've got clear opportunities today in rail. You've got great opportunities in fleet, both trucks, vans, and buses, where you can basically mine the telemetry data and add, services. Verizon just bought 2 big fleet companies. So fleet, fleet motor vehicles and rail is where it starts. I think cars and planes are the holy grail. Cars more from a business point of view, and planes from a technology point of view, but they're going to be delayed for a couple of reasons, right? I mean, you already have OnStar is 10 years old, right, 15 years old. There's already telemetry data going up from the car. People are investing massively, Cruise with 19 employees selling for $1 billion. That's a big outcome. So, with tens of millions of vehicles, being sold a year, that's where everybody's chasing. But the use case is a very difficult one from a technology perspective, right? To get to true real time there, you're talking about, picoseconds, right?
Right.
Where in other, IoT sectors, operating at the millisecond or the second level actually is plenty fast. Planes, the issue is just regulation, right? Anything that touches the safety of a plane will just take years.
So you're saying why these things are difficult. Where's the opportunity? Where's the next 2, 3, 5 years? What would you do if you think, okay, I give all that, I take all that. Where are there opportunities to make more money?
I think it's right now the rail operators and the fleet.
So you'd stay with rail and, okay.
Absolutely.
Thorsten, go first.
Yeah, I see the bus companies as well, as you say. I always like the example of the school bus. Really parents like to see the school bus is coming in 5 minutes, getting alert, send your kid out now. You see the kid onboarding, whatever recognition mechanism they have on the bus. They have regulated wireless LAN so they can do dirty things on the bus, stuff like this. And now what we see is cameras watching at the bus driver with artificial intelligence, and they can see if he texts with the right hand, texts with the left hand, making the cosmetics. I can't do this anymore. But stuff like this, or phoning right or left.
Yeah.
And this is all in one application. And how many million school buses you have around the world? And parents would love to have this.
I love your sort of monitoring microphones. I think it's Thorsten NSA that we have on stage here. It's really interesting. But it's very, that's a real concrete pain point, if we can address that.
Yeah, let me build on both of the previous points. We're starting to see much more comprehensive systems of managing the entire transportation system in a dynamic way, right? So that you can actually, when you start, for example, in San Francisco, you're taking a BART and you're taking a bus and you're taking, let's say, Lyft or Uber. So managing all of those dynamically, I think definitely cities like Singapore and others are working towards that. But it is about business model, right? And the challenge that service providers have is that they've been chasing this concept, can I find another iPhone like ARPU? And with transportation, I think what we're seeing is, yes, most of the new cars are not getting connected, but it is not just one big use case and profit pool that will give you $80 ARPU. It's probably 10 or 12 different services, from aftermarket sales to service to insurance and other things that combined may actually get there.
Got it. And so, yeah, I think something like insurance, that industry is seriously going to be being disrupted, and certainly in the car side of things, it's going to change completely. May, what about you?
Definitely security.
Yeah.
We actually got approached by server vendors about car security, because if you're driving on highway, your engine is stopped by hackers, it can be life-threatening. It's not an area we're focusing on right now, but I think there are lots of opportunities.
But how far out is that? As you say, it's like, we don't quite know how quickly that's going to come. Do you think that's like, are you going to make big money out of that in 2 years, in 5 years, in 10? When's that really going to be an opportunity?
That depends on how fast the connected car is deployed.
Got it. So a lot of
And you just gave me money to start a company, so...
I did. I absolutely did. I just want to know where you're going to land, because if you land on the car, it's an interesting area, but a tough one. We talked a little bit about sort of intersections of technology. So Thorsten was talking about microphones and sort of applications that can be attached to those. Where are there other sort of, we think about trifectas, like, for example, computer vision, smart glasses, and AR or VR, right? The sort of like, if I'm trying to in sort of bring someone into the company, train them up as a trainee, and I give them a 500-page manual and say, this is how this thing works. They look at me and they go, Martin, you're from the past, which is a phrase my daughter uses very often. And so, my teenage daughter, I should say. So it's like, how can we like get smart glasses, AR and computer vision such that you can train somebody without having to give them a 500-page manual? Is that what IoT can do? Sensors in the vehicles, feedback to the camera. That's like one kind of trifecta. And we think about this in venture all the time. Where are the opportunities of these intersecting technologies? Can I ask you, where do you see some other ones, David?
So what we describe that as what I call greenfield data, right? So if you've got a new technology like AR, VR, or you have LiDAR and radar in a car, right? You've got cameras now literally in every place you can't even imagine where cameras are, and microphones, right? 5 years ago, it's vibration, right? I mean, you used to have, temperature, pressure, humidity type sensors, and then you went to vibration, motion type sensors. Now you've actually got much more advanced, now a lot more data processing to be done, right? But the reality is that presents a great opportunity because you can't just retrofit those greenfield sensors into the brownfield OT environment and use the old system, right? So it's a great entree for all of the companies doing IoT. Having said that, we've also found that just mining the brownfield data better is actually powerful because you have lots of countries, I'll give you Japan as an example, where you have an older workforce, right? Much older workforce. They've been manufacturing in kind of old style OT systems for decades. These people are moving on. And people don't have the tribal knowledge anymore about how those machines actually are supposed to work. Right? So lots of things you do to automate and improve those old brownfield processes too.
Right.
But greenfield is clearly where everybody's focused on today.
Thorsten, go first.
Go ahead.
Sure. I actually think machine learning is just a perfect tool for IoT because when we define IoT, those are the devices are purposely built just for a fixed set of functionalities. For example, X-ray machine only supposed to take picture, upload the picture. We don't use X-ray machine to surf the web, to do Pokemon Go, whatever, at least not yet. Their behavior is relatively simple, so that's very easy for machine learning to learn about its behavior and to do whatever is needed to be done there and to scale it up. So actually the challenge part for IoT is the scalability. How do you scale up something to billions of devices, all different kinds of devices? And that's also where machine learning actually does better than human being compared to manual configuration.
But combined with other, there's specific things you would combine that with right now, where you think there's an opportunity? So it's machine learning and?
I think actually, coming back to the data point, I think machine learning is very, very good at training the machine learning model to learn about all these IoT devices' personalities, their behavior, their data, and then build on top of that. There are lots of things you can do.
Got it.
I'll maybe give you a couple of examples, because I think what we're hearing is that IoT is really a foundation, right? A foundation for VR, for ML implementations and so forth. If you think about preventive maintenance, right? It's all about ML, right? And so looking at the data and then making sure that you can anticipate the failures. If you think about the VR experience, right? There are actually companies that are doing these industrial goggles now because it actually is useful for a control engineer on the oil rig to have both hands available, right? And they see the data. So these are the kind of examples where we're actually seeing the intersections.
If you look out, I mean, I think one area that I was trying to think a lot about is sort of security in the round. And we have drones. We have these sensors going in everywhere. We have the machine learning. We have, and yet in my home, for example, I have a Nest camera. It just picks up everything that moves and doesn't tell me exactly what it is, doesn't understand, so I get like 1,000 alerts. I would love that to be more smart. I think you're going to see, I came across a company the other day, it makes sensors that go in in building bricks, in blocks. And so you could think you could have drone, you could have a very big wall somewhere. I don't know where that might be, but there's going to be some big opportunities. And you could have sort of machine learning to work out what's going on the ground. Do I need people anymore? And I think one of the things that we have to think about with IoT, it's like, yeah, it can enhance, it can be like machine assisted, but it can also, if I'm thinking about the future, it's like, where can stuff that's being done by people actually be done by IoT? And so security is one particular area where there tends to be quite a lot of people. Are there other areas like that? Thorsten.
Yeah, that's the most interesting discussion if you go for human resource reduction by IoT. And what I really saw in the last couple of months was the most interesting discussion that we first reduced lawyers.
Lawyers?
Yeah, lawyers. So I was like, what has
How many
IoT
lawyers
to
are
do
there
with
in the room?
lawyers?
Hands up.
You know?
Oh, we're in Fenwick West. Oh, that's okay then. Oh, tears.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I mean,
sorry guys.
Combining artificial intelligence with specific other technologies and going to databases of 247,000 reference cases in the US legal system, and I don't know it because I'm coming from Germany, gives, like powerful artificial intelligence systems to answer you. There's this nice example of this guy who made this parking ticket solution where he reduced 172,000 parking tickets. He defended by templates. You just type in, I parked there this time, He gives you a template, you send it to the police, and he defended 172,000 parking tickets by artificial intelligence. And then the report was about, hey, this is reducing lawyers a lot. And I'm like, lawyers? Come on, I thought about, low-educated, construction side workers.
Yeah.
But it will go to every level.
So up to the white collar.
Everywhere. Doctors, particularly you probably can get on
I
this.
can give you a personal example. Once I went to a doctor office and this nurse was talking about particular medication. I was like, oh, what's that medication for? And he went on to Google to do a search. And I was like, I'm paying here $300 every 5 minutes. I can go back home and do a Google search myself. So there are definitely things the machine can do better, and there are definitely things can be automated. But on the other side, as Martin was saying, I think for moving forward for IoT actually enable us to do lots of personalized, customized, and that alone cannot be done, at least today, by machine alone. For example, in security, it's like we need more intelligence than what machine can do. For example, in our real world, not just because we have Muslim terrorist group, then you just the problem is not going to be solved by Muslim bank, and because they're immigrants coming out of the South, then doesn't mean the problem we solve by building a big wall. So there are lots of intelligence need to be put in, and for security, it's like we cannot assume nowadays we can always separate the bad guys with good guys. You have to assume there are always bad guys coming into mix with the good people in the room. Then we need intelligence to figure out who's the bad guys, who are the good guys. And we can use machine learning to help. We can use lots of intelligence software to help, but it still needs, at this stage, we still need lots of.
We need lots of sensors too, right? In Britain there are cameras every square foot of the country practically, and people say, well, that's worrying. But on the other hand, when you have situations like terrorism, you need to think about intelligently how we use all of these IoT sensors in ways that connect together and can help us pick out those bad apples in very large pools.
It might be a good topic for the whole another panel, right? It's a hot topic. But with every transition, you see some jobs being lost, some new jobs being created, right? And my sense is that what I've observed is jobs that require sort of a single person working on a repetitive task, of course, are sort of first in line for automation. But at the same time, jobs that require collaboration, creativity, sort of the not just a repetitive task, I believe, will actually flourish.
And what about things like exoskeletons? Sort of super Maciej. You can go down to the whatever the cold face. It's a scary thought that, but I mean it's human enhanced through connected machinery, devices.
But I think this is only a transition phase. Is a very good example you just brought up by these devices making you the super strong man is because we're just lacking a kind of robotics technology to do exactly this, combined with artificial intelligence to learn about the procedures you do. So you take a human, put this into this kind of robot, but this is just the transition phase because you will get so much data out of this that about 5 years later you just put the human out and keep the robot going because he can do it himself.
Yeah, interesting. David, you're...
I tend to be an optimist on this. I mean, if you think about all IoT really represents is the next phase of automation, right? We're just talking robotics is basically the first phase of automation. IoT, when you connect everything, we'll probably put it on steroids, and so there is the risk of more job loss as you go down that path. But reality is most of what I think we've seen today is actually worker assist, right? You can't really remove the human entirely from the picture. Now, there's some jobs, right, that you can take the human out of the picture. But I'm optimistic because I think what happens is that new sectors of the economy grow, and will be other sectors, right, that will take up that employment base, right? So it's, you can be very pessimistic about this, but I think the economy has proven over a couple centuries that we're pretty dynamic.
So we're coming towards the end, and we'll switch to Q&A in a moment, but just sort of, I just wanted to ask you, given our discussion now, have any of you changed your investment view and either would like to give me back my 5 million or would actually now put it somewhere else, given our discussion, or are you going to stay where you
Maybe you should invest more money. I think
Yeah.
5 is not enough.
I'm just being generous, actually. Anybody change their views? Some thoughts that came to you while we were having this discussion that said actually there's more opportunity, more revenue stream here than where I thought initially?
I'm a startup CEO since 20 years. If I would give up already, like after 22 minutes, you wouldn't give me any money.
Yeah, I'd be fired. You're fired. Oh, sorry.
I go.
Okay, good. So I think we should perhaps segue to Q&A, and we have our IoT connected microphone carriers. So questions from the floor.
We are reading your minds now.
We'll take one up front or one there. Yeah, whoever's going to go first. Oh, we got it.
I'll go first.
Go first.
Yes, thanks. Great talk today. And I think what my first question is about having gone to CES and seeing the consumer side of IoT is really going, and not just ideas, but really flat out. The connected home, the connected car. The projections are that all cars will be connected by the year 2020. Massive numbers. But it seems to me there's a huge delta in the business plan around adoption. Do consumers value it? Do they think they can get it to work? Do they think they can keep it working? And all the research I see from Accenture and other places are all saying that the consumers are pretty skeptical right now that it's worth it, they can get it working, and they can keep it working. So is there a market opportunity, or how are the IoT manufacturers thinking about educating the consumer in a different way now? Because this is a much more complex environment. In fact, I use the term, the technology stack is now consumer-facing. You think about that complexity, how are you going to cross that chasm, and not just about how the product works?
I think the most challenging point in consumer as well as industry is complexity. And I always compare this with PBX to IP telephony like 15 years ago, where everybody asks you, why do we need IP telephony? I have a working phone kind of thing. Would you recommend a parent today to replace his baby phone from a traditional broadcasting technology to a wireless LAN, so wired, wireless technology, and then you come home and the baby is blue-faced and screaming because it lost the connectivity to the cloud? I mean, wow. These are the concerns the customers have. So we all here and in the industry, we have to take care 100% connectivity, 100% security. You don't want to have people breaking into your baby phone and recording everything what happens in your home. They're going to skiing in Lake Tahoe tomorrow. That's a good time to get into the house and get rid of everything. And it's just done by the baby phone. I have a camera at home which is already advanced. It's called Smart Frog or something like this. You rent it by the months, 5 months. You put it somewhere and it's connected to your wireless LAN. It goes an alarm to your iPhone. It was 2 minutes installation. That's nice. And you don't invest. It's OPEX. It's not CAPEX. That's also nice. Every week the camera disconnects to the wireless. I call my son because it's too much for me, can you connect this again, stuff like this. Okay. So I think this is the...
Anybody else?
Yeah, maybe, because I actually think this is one of the biggest misconceptions about IoT, right? Every time I talk about IoT, the first question is, oh, this is great connected fridge or connected toaster, right? It's a nice feature, but I think in general, my sense is connected home is still a solution looking for a problem. I've started to see some early use cases where it makes sense to interconnect classes of devices in a home, right? Like elderly care or home security and so forth. I do believe that down the road there will be probably the biggest disruptions in IoT will happen in the home. But right now I think it's a let's connect and see what happens sort of the approach. So I think that
Yeah.
my sense that what consumers are benefiting from IoT today is through things like connected car, through better logistics, so you can ship millions of packages at Cyber Monday and
Yeah.
so forth. Connected home is yet to come.
I think you. Sorry, Nick, go ahead.
Yeah, I think eventually home will be like a small business without IT department. So we need product there that can, normal people can use. Actually, when we started the company a couple of years ago, we looked into consumer first, but we decided to go for enterprise because we think the consumer, the timing is not there yet for the benefits to exceed the hassle and the risk. But for the past 6 months, we start to see some interest and momentum. Their ISPs, their home routers start looking more into IoT.
I think there's just two things. One, price points. I mean, anything connected right now, it seems to get this massive premium. And it's like, well, why? Like you said, it's a feature. I'm not going to pay a premium. So number one, how can we get that down? Secondly, and is there another business model? I mean, we didn't talk about freemium. Maybe I give you something, and then I make money on all the additional services. Maybe that's a model. But the second thing is, where's the pain point? I have a dryer in my home. It's blocked. I didn't work that out until about 5 weeks in, and the house is filling with fumes. Why isn't there a little sensor at the back of the dryer, right? Simple. One sensor solves my pain point. 15,000 house fires I discovered online caused a year in America by blocked dryers. So simple things. Let's get those pain points solved first of all. There was lots of other questions. Let's get this gentleman here with the microphone.
Thank you. My focus is creating new markets. And so I want to take the ideas from both of you and think about something for a second. Is there a business in being between a non-medical edge connector and the EHR, the health record? Is there a business in taking data that's non-medical and making it available to records?
May, do you want to deal with the health?
So the question is?
Non-medical data?
Non-medical edge collectors. For instance, your phone, which is not a medical device. Looks like lots of data.
And putting it into your
car
health, directly into your health.
Collects lots of data on what you're doing, on what your values might be and how you drive. There's lots of information that the medical community could use to improve decision making when it's time to actually do treatment plans.
Absolutely. Absolutely, but I see the mentality in healthcare, correct me if I'm wrong, but I see the mentality in healthcare is the highest priority is not I cure you, I make you feel better. The highest priority is I'm not sued, or if one day I'm sued, I can win.
I understand your comment.
Sorry.
I don't think that's the highest priority, except in the legal community inside medical care, where it is definitely a very high priority. I mean, there are a lot of people in medical care who would not want to do it that way.
I know a couple of startups that actually have been pursuing exactly that mode, right? Which is like, how do I use my iPhone or my other device and start getting the information? And I think it's still early because of all the legal privacy issues and so forth, but I actually believe it's a very promising area.
Okay, next question. Who's got the mic? We need to move some mics around. One here. Okay, thank you. We'll take one else question, and then I'll go down the back. Yeah.
So there's kind of a two-part question, but on the industrial side, how far are we in actually getting standards adopted for use? And the follow-up to that is it really a gating item?
So how far are we?
I can go ahead.
I guess it depends on the sector, obviously. I would say there's lots of movement towards, like Open Fog Consortium. There's movement to try to standardize different layers of the stack to make it easier, because part of the challenge, you're taking very disparate OT system data and trying to connect everything up and then get it all to the cloud. And then in between, you might want to do something valuable with the data. So there's different efforts of standardization. It's still pretty early. What you're seeing mostly is what I would call islanded solutions now that are starting to be replicated, right? I find a way to optimize this process or that machine, and I can take it across hundreds or thousands of factories. Kind of this building block approach that Maciej talked about. So that's happening, frankly, far faster than the standards are coming along, but it'll take a while before it becomes, quote unquote, standardized. And I don't think it'll ever be fully standard like. It's not like intranetworking where every IP device needs to communicate. And to the data sovereignty point, the data is, the business models around data are really exciting. The problem is that there's data sovereignty, there's data privacy issues, and the customer always, if you're the industrial IoT platform that you ship all the data to, that platform provider doesn't own the data. The customer still owns the data, and are they going to share that data with anybody else? That's a challenge.
And you will also find many, many companies who are making 90% of their margin out of data, meaning they will never publish this interface. So I can tell you, for example, oil and gas industry or other industries, even elevators. An elevator manufacturer does 90% of his profit out of maintenance of the elevator. He will never open up his protocols of the process control units because anybody could do maintenance on what elevators in the next second. So there will be standards, but there will be a lot of protected environments trying to prevent this, that is working seamlessly, because they have no commercial interest into that.
Okay.
Full agree. I can just add to it. I think that it's not only a standard issue, it's a business structure issue, I think, and that's what you were talking about, right? We are in the process of changing the business structure from, here is, let's say, in automation world, you have 5 to 7 groupings of vendors who have grouped around semi-proprietary standard. But what we are seeing is customers coming in and saying, I'm done with it. I don't want to go to one company to build a complete train station with a proprietary system. So the end customer is actually driving the change, but it's a slow process.
Next question.
Sure. So I'll preface this with saying this is going to be a very hard question, so direct your animosity at Martin, not at me. But Martin, you offered each of your panelists $5 million to invest and said, what's the profit turnaround to 5 years from now? But you also started this by saying that IoT is at the place where electricity was in the 1880s, and then cited consumer electronics that didn't appear until more than a century later. So let me ask you, what's your 100-year vision for this space?
It's kind of like the 50s, I think. You know, sort of, I mean, I can't remember exactly when TV was, but it's like, so you could see very early on some paths. So my vision is, I think, the twofold, and the way we see it as investors. One, it is a very, very exciting space, right? This is transformational, and there is no question that IoT will have as much, if not maybe more, once everything is connected and censored, impact as electricity had. So we're very optimistic about it. The challenge is to get through the next 10, 15 years to get to that point when the breakouts really start. And we've already seen billion-dollar companies built in this space, right? Companies like Jasper, which was bought by a certain company not so far away from this stage for a 1.4 billion last year. That was a platform for automobiles, to the connected car. So think carefully about where those opportunities are. I could talk at length about where we see them. Particularly, we think security is a really interesting space. It's a complex space, and it's very early on. But getting that part of the stack right, we think that's a part of the stack that is not complete yet. And there are a lot of opportunities there. So May's company is a really interesting one, and there'll be many more. I think a second area is in terms of where you see this interconnectivity between different technologies. I gave you the example of computer vision with AR, with smart glasses. That's one area where you could see, once that emerges and evolves, there's some really interesting opportunities down that path. So it's thinking about the intersection between those. But somebody, I think, on the panel said to me earlier on, it's like, IoT is the longest desert. You've got to think like Lawrence of Arabia, right? You're going to go into this place, and you've got to have stacked up on the back of
Hopefully
your truck or your camels, enough water, enough supplies, and you're going to land somewhere and make that enough to get you through the desert, because out the other side, there's going to be a massive and very, very profitable oasis, okay? That's my view. Now,
and I think you're absolutely right on the security side, because what I always recognize in my life is security sells best. You know, like, because this is the biggest threat for everybody, like CEOs. I mean, a CEO might not understand why this data is relevant, or this machine, or how or what, but he understands that he has to have the highest security. My first company was in online banking. But the feature they bought is we had the best security solution in the world. It was a $13 billion IPO because of the security, not of the online banking. Security sells best. You don't want to switch down 15,000 cell towers in a country by IoT, you know, like, and then take months to recover them or something like this. You have to have the best security in IoT on the market.
And I also worry, if we don't get it right as an industry and as innovators, we're going to end up with legislation that's going to actually lock it down for us in ways that are very damaging to innovation. In America in particular, one can see sort of potential litigation. Europe has issues as well. So this is going to be, if we don't solve this problem, we're going to have a societal issue that could hold back innovation broadly in IoT. So we think that's a very important space. Next question. Who's got the mic? Someone, oh, here. Okay, please go ahead.
Thanks again for the very thoughtful comments today. On this topic of regulation in particular, I thought one thing that has driven the automotive innovation over the last few years has been the previous administration's tendency to be pretty hard on environmental aspects of the automobile. We're seeing a little bit of that being rolled back a bit by the new one. Do you see, I mean, then there's been a little bit of a tendency in many automobile manufacturers now scaling back on the sort of move towards all the wonderful things we're seeing with autonomous driving, especially because there's a huge impact on the fuel efficiency there. Do you see that having a long-term impact, or do you think this is more of a short-term blip that's going to soon be off the radar very quickly?
Who wants to take that first?
I can start, and I will stay away from politics. My sense is that there are very powerful business cases in the environmental space, right? If you look at, for example, windmills and the battery operations and so forth. If you look at scale, the electricity created by renewables actually is getting to a point where it actually is getting cheaper than coming from coal and so forth, right? So IoT is enabling a lot of these things, right? If you think about a wind farm, it's basically a big IoT machine and the system. If you think about implementations in environmental area, for example, in terms of pollution and monitoring and dealing with pollution, dealing with water conservation and so forth. So I believe the industry is actually growing very rapidly, regardless of politics in the US.
Okay.
I think this will be driven by, like if you look to China, for example, like the pollution in some of the cities can't get any higher anymore. Just people die. I mean, like not thousands, millions in the future will die. So they have to reduce the pollution, and you cannot just stop the individual traffic. So you have to come up with, really, it starts with pool. I mean, Uber is an IoT application, more or less, if you see this. The car is the phones are the sensors and stuff like this. So pool cars, more optimization of transportation, the bus stops individually instead frequently, and all the stuffs. The cars have to reduce the pollution and stuff like this. It's the only way to rescue this large 25 million plus resident cities. Is the only way is IoT.
And I think one thing I think I mentioned it earlier, but I'll just make that point again. It's like, this is an industry that hasn't changed for decades, right? And all of a sudden you have new entrants who don't give a damn about the past. Google, Apple coming, I'm sure, Tesla. I mean, for years, no one could have conceived there would be an entrance to this market because it looked like it was locked down. Now you have companies that have shown that they can come in and get to scale, or at least one, and prove that there are sort of things that you can do in a car, software over-the-air updates, right? Self-driving, up to a point, that you could not conceive of before. I think you're going to see innovation pushed by these insurgents in ways that is not going to allow the existing industry to stand still. So I think regulation plays a role, but I think there are more fundamental innovative forces going on here that's going to accelerate rather than put a brake on that pace of change. Notice what I did there. Next question, there was one at the back.
So
I think.
Are there specific proposals in regulation or law, either in the US or elsewhere in the world, that could have a big impact on the adoption of IoT?
Who wants to go first?
Yeah, there's one thing most of the people don't know is there is in most of the countries of the world, there's called like an electrical law kind of things. And this electrical law says you have to switch at the edge. Meaning if you have a pump and you have power and you have a sensor and the facility gets flooded and the pump is not starting because you lost the connectivity to the cloud, no insurance in the world is paying a dime. They will tell you, don't make your problem to my problem. So which means is you can configure when the pump switches on from the cloud, download it to the edge, and then the edge says sensor signal, 2 feet of water, pump on, period. Water goes down, pump off, otherwise the pump overturns in heat and dies. So these are the typical regulation you find, and most of the people don't know. They think they can switch things on and off from the cloud, and there's no impact on the legal side or on the insurance side. There is a lot of impacts on that.
Got it. David, you want to?
I think there's two types of laws or regulations that are at play here. one I talked about earlier, which is the data sovereignty, data privacy laws, right? So to the extent that, we're actually starting to get very siloed. Most countries don't want any other country having access to data from their citizens or companies. The second is the critical infrastructure laws, like FERC and NERC in this country, where anything that touches the electric grid or military systems are going to be islanded too. So I think there will be impingements, if you will. I don't think environmental, the question on the cars is interesting. You just went through this experience with the defeat device software, right, in diesel engines to kind of circumvent the law, right? But I agree with Martin. There are ways, that innovation in cars are going to continue to happen, right? Environmental laws may slow down, the rate at which you can put technology in the car, but it's not going to stop it. But anything that touches, I think, the electric grid, that touches any kind of national safety systems are going to be a problem.
I think we have already great examples of actually governments being involved and driving that IoT transition. If you think about smart grid, if you think about rail and positive train control, if you think about food safety and tracking, if you think about medicines and so forth, these kind of regulations in the US, as an example, drove the adoption of IoT. You have Industry 4.0, you have China 2025, and all these things that are more of a government advocating. And also, to be honest, governments are also collectively the biggest market and biggest buyers. So whatever they buy, whatever standards they adopt, the rest of the industry will be adopting as well. So they have a big role to play.
Yeah, and
go ahead.
Actually, last year, FDA came out a new guidance on how to tighten the security for medical devices, because they do see lots of issues with the connected medical devices. And after that, we do see hospitals are spending more money and more budget looking for solutions to tighten the medical device security.
Yes, so regulation can be very good for security, right, May? So you hope there's a lot more coming, right?
I'm sure there are going to be more coming.
Okay. Two more questions, I think, probably time. One, who's got the microphone? The gentleman here, sorry.
Excuse me. I want to follow up on a point that you had made about platforms and the plethora of platforms that are out there. And I want to tie it to the $5 million that you gave to each of the startups. So now, can you tell me a little bit about your thought process? You can't do it all yourself. You've narrowed down your use case. So platform selection, what do you do? What are you going to spend your money on? What's important to you from a startup perspective that you're looking for from either a platform or something that will get you onto the on-ramp for IoT? You can't do it all yourself.
Who wants to take that? Thorsten.
Yeah. I think you have a nice collection today of open source product. That's the first starting point if you look from the technology stack of view is. So look at the most common protocols, interchange for consortiums. So what are the standards, communication protocols your platform should support? Then look for the open source software which makes all this available, this ecosystem. Scalability, if you want to scale, if it's industrial IoT, you want to look for scalability in these platforms. And then you can properly, very good, concentrate on your business case. But that's what we see typically in these platform games is you can't develop everything from scratch. Like artificial intelligence, as mentioned in the beginning, you find nice platforms already today. Don't invent, again, artificial intelligence libraries. I mean, this is, you can spend $100 million just on the libraries before you start your business. So get these components, stick together, use the most common standards, whatever, RESTful APIs, MQTT, all the stuff. And then plug it together and get your business stake on top of it.
I would build on that. I think it's I would turn this question more into not about the platform, but about a customer solution, right? Usually you will have a handful of players that you need to partner with. So build a partner ecosystem around not technology, but the solution to the customer. It will be a combination of vertical players and horizontal players. What do you bring to the table? But focus on the customer problem, build the ecosystem around it, and that's how I would get started.
And just one thing I'd add, sort of a rider to that. It's like, think carefully about your platform and your relationship with the platform. And when we look back at the history of software, there's been some platforms that have proven very friendly at the beginning and then suddenly decide that they want to actually do what you're doing. So, that kind of dynamic, that ecosystem dynamic, is it defensible over the long term? Is this, I'm a flea on the back of the elephant? Is the elephant going to whack me with its trunk one day? Or actually, can I build a lot more sort of fleas and a lot more elephants out of this, right? Just think very carefully. That's a very bad analogy. I apologize for that. But anyway, one last question.
Yeah, there was a lot of discussion about security and the importance of security in the IoT overall solution. But security is important, but it's also an overhead. So how can you comment on, from a business case perspective, how do we make security work? Because it's not one security in one part, it's security in the overall solution. There are so many components, it's chains that are brought together. How do we make security work from a business case perspective? I'm talking about if we take a plane ride today, we pay $10 for each leg of the journey, right, for security, but it's an overhead. How do we make that work so it doesn't overwhelm?
Let's start with May. I don't want to sort of, you'll miss security, but I think as you are in that field, how do you make this not an overhead, and how do you make it pay?
Well, I think, of course, the reason we're in business security, because we do believe it's important enough, eventually people will pay. And I think for IoT, one very important point is for security, in addition to IT security, is to provide security with the minimum amount of disruption. Because that's the last thing you want to do, with the minimum amount of disruption to the operation and with the minimum amount of overhead, the hassle. So they want to treat it as a black box. I want you to give me the guarantee, the insurance that you can protect my assets, my connected devices. For that, I'm willing to pay. Right now, we don't see from our customer paying is a problem. The only thing is, don't interrupt my operation, and don't give me more work. I have to hire another 10 IT people and talent, I have to train them. Don't ask me for any of that. But if you can provide what we need, can protect our connected devices, we're willing to pay.
David, sorry.
I was just going to say, in addition to business process overhead, which is huge disruption, it's also latency, right? So just in the computer world, everybody knows, the more layers you put on, right, the less value potentially in the application, because you've basically taken away anything that's real time. So it's both.
I very much like compare this with online banking, because I come from that space. You know, like you started with looking at your account balance, then you looked at your transactions history, then you started to make online money transfer and stuff like this. And you needed the same evolution of security you need in IoT. Starting reading a sensor was the first thing. Then you recognize there's this min of the middle attack, which means the infection doesn't come on the transportation, on the legacy system host, it comes on your PC, which could be the IoT gateway or whatever, the in-between sensor. And the next thing comes up, once you do wired transactions, you need a token, some sign of security token. So before you switch on a machine from somewhere in the world, you should have a token which enables you to switch this on in the most secure way. But convenience is the most important factor, because if people cannot use this, so banking came up with long transaction lists, and then you had transaction number generators, you had cards, security cards. The most convenient solution made the market.
Right.
Maybe I can add. My sense is that if you look at security as an overlay, I think we'll be in trouble. We really need to incorporate it into every business process, right? What we've been encouraging customers is go to CISO, go to your chief security officer, expand their scope from just the IT world to the entire world, right? Don't reinvent the wheel. We've done it in so many different places, in financial industry, in other industries, highly secure, highly available systems. So. And we all know what the Verizon report said, 70% of cyber incidents come from known vulnerabilities, things that we know exist and we know how to fix them. So let's start there, right?
Yeah.
And once we've done it, we can start getting into some new use cases.
Yeah, and one more thing, in terms of the cost, the extra they have to pay for security. The problem is if they don't pay for security, they have to pay more. For example, hospitals, they just cannot afford to get attacked. Then the ransomware can cost a lot more than what you're paying for security. And also they cannot afford to have their hospital name on the top line news.
Yeah, I think it's like
the reputation.
There's one message you take away from this. It's not about IoT, it's about ROIOT. It's you've got to demonstrate why I should invest in security. Because if I don't, here's the costs, right? Mm-hmm. Let's just imagine this. What is the impact? And we can see, we've had enough examples now to be able to like demonstrate what the opportunity cost of this is. So not IoT, ROIOT. I think we're done.
All right. I'd like to thank our speakers very much for sharing your perspectives so candidly. Including Martin and Martin for leading this discussion so masterfully. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. They make me look good.
And as a very small token of our appreciation, we have for you, of course, the speaker T-shirt.
That's why we came here.
If you need another size, let us know. Don't forget, a copy of Maciej's book awaits you outside this room. You've been a wonderful audience. A recording of this program will be available on our YouTube channel within a day or two. We hope you find that to be a useful resource, and we will see you next time. Good day.